Okay, in chapter 2, we really focused on drawing pictures. In chapter 3, we start looking at numerical summary statistics like averages, standard deviations, correlation coefficients. So how do we calculate those, what they mean? That's what these videos, and we'll start with the easiest stuff. Let's start with the measure of central tendency or central location. And by far, the one that's used the most is the mean. The mean is a balance point. It is the fulcrum on a seesaw, if you want to think of it that way. The median is exactly in the middle. The mode is what happens most often. A weighted average allows us to generate an average where we give more weight to different categories. We can also calculate percentiles and quartiles fairly easily. And let's go ahead and go over the geometric mean, which is really only there for you finance people if you're trying to determine the average annual return of investments or growth rates. So let's go into Excel, start with the start salary, the mutual fund, and go through on how to do these. So in the chapter 3 data file, the start salary, so these are starting salaries, and there is a function to calculate the average or the mean. There's a function in Excel called average. So 3,940, and all that means is that that's the middle or the balance point if I would grab these and plot those on a bar graph, something like this, then this mean, it's not quite the middle. It's a function of volume and distance from the middle, but that's the balance point. Okay. Well, what is the median? The median is if we would sort this data from high to low, so if we would grab the data and sort it, and let's sort it from based on the starting salary, and let's sort it smallest to largest, and we have a total of 12 data points. So if I go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the average between the two middle points, if we have an even number, so my median would be the average of the two middle numbers, and I have a total of 12, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the average of those two would get my median. Or you can just use the formula in Excel that calculates a median. The mode is what happens most often, just which of these happens the most. It looks like 3,880 happened the most. It happened twice. I can calculate a percentile, so let's get this back to what it was. Let's get this sorted. No, let's leave it like that. Let's leave this sorted. So a percentile, if I wanted to calculate it, something like the 75th percentile. What a percentile is if I would have data that's ordered, what value over here, what value is such that the 75% or more of the items are at that value or less. So there's a couple of forms. You can use the dot XCE if you want it exclusive. I think that's probably a good one to use. XEXC, excuse me. I grab the data, and then I want the 75th. Now you got to use a real number, so you put in 0.75. And so 4025, which is somewhere between these two, at that number, 75% of all the values are less than that. But what if I wanted the 50th percentile, which is also the middle? So the 50th percentile is the same as the median. If I change this to 0.5, there you go, it's the same thing. So the definition of the median is it's equal to the 50th percentile. And you can calculate, there's such thing called quartiles. A quartile, if it's the first quartile, that's just the 25th percentile. And the second quartile is the 50th or the median. The third, 75th, and so on. Well, that's it. The fourth is 100%. I think there's a formula that does a quartile. Yeah. So if I go quartile of this data, and let's put in the second one. I should have done that one there. So that is the second quartile. I put in 2 as my argument. That's the second one, which is also equal to the 50th percentile, which is also equal to the median. Okay, so that covers the mean, median, and mode, and percentile quartiles. Let's do a weighted average. And I'm just going to make up some numbers. I think in the class, this is how you're graded. It's that homework is worth 35%, the midterm is worth 30%, the final is 0.3, and attendance is 5%. And I'm going to show these as percents, even though they're real numbers. Okay, so here's the weight. That's the weight. Here's your score. So let's say on the homework you do a pretty good job and you make a 95%. You make 95 points or 95%. And I could show it again, probably ought to show that as a percent. And let's say the midterm, you do great, but I mean, you do a good solid, you make an 80. And the final, you make an 85. And the attendance grade, you're here all the time, so you get 100%. So these are the scores. Let's show them all as percents. These are your scores you make. This is what they're worth. So how do I determine what my final grade is? Well, how that works, it's a weighted average. So what happens is you take 35% of this, or this times 35%, plus this times 30%, plus this times this, plus this times this. So if you want to do it individually, I could take this times 35%, and these become my total points. Or my total that goes to the total, and if I sum those, that's too many percent. Total, this is what I would make in the class. An 88. So I get 33 of the 35 points on the homework because I made a 95, so 33 of the 35 gives me this. I get 80% of this, so I get 24 points. I get 85% this, and I get these. So how could I pull that up to an A? Well, maybe if I could somehow bump this up to an 85, that gives me there. Maybe the final, make that an 87. Look at there, I can get to an A. So that's what a weighted average is. It's a weight against some number. And then the last thing on this video is a geometric mean. So a geometric mean is not used very often except in finance where we're looking at growth rates. So here's the example. We've got a mutual fund. We've got some financial product, some stock or mutual fund. And let's say we start with some money and we invest in it. And the first year we lose a lot. We lose 22%. So let's just say we start with $100. Start with $100. Start with $100. Well, what is my growth factor? The growth factor is equal to 1 plus this number. Let's show it as a percent. So let's start. Show it as a real number. So my growth factor is actually I lost money. So what I would have is that if I start with $100 and I had a return of minus 22%, my growth factor is 0.78 or 0.779. So if I start with 100 and my growth rate is negative, I actually at the end of year one only have 78 bucks. Well, the next year, I start with 77 bucks or $77.90 and I make 28% of my money, so my growth factor is 1.28, like that. So, and I'd show all these as a dollar amount. So I'm back to over 100 bucks, and if I do that every month thing at the end of year 10, I start with 100, and based on these returns, I made $133.45. Well, what is my average annual return of these returns? What is my average annual return? And you can use something called a geometric mean. And what you want to do is take the geometric mean of this growth factor. And it gives you a return of about 2.9%. Your growth factor is this, so my return show that as a percent. About 2.93%. So this gives you your return of 1.029 of the growth factor, the average growth factor, which is a return of 2.93% on an average, on an annual average number. This is and the formula in the book, if you want to see, that's what we use. What it is, and you don't really need to know this, it's what we do is that we take the product of all of these growth factors, multiply them all together, and raise that to the power of 1 divided by how many we have. So it's to the 1/10th root. So that formula is the one you would use, the geometric mean, but that's what it's doing. That's the math behind what that is. Now that's different than if you used a basic average. So the wrong way to do it is just to take the average of these and say, hey, I got a return of 5%. Well, that's not what you got. So when you're talking about growth factors, you don't want to just take the average of those. That's misleading. It's wrong and it's misleading. When you've got growth factors, you want to use a geometric mean. And again, you don't use that very often, but I wanted to show you how to do that in Excel. Okay, so we've covered central location. The next video will be on variability. Thanks.